It was always 5 chairs. When Michael returned to his childhood home after nearly 20 years, the first thing he noticed was the dining room. Nothing had changed. Same lace tablecloth, same flickering chandelier, same faint scent of jasmine from the old potpourri bowl. But it was the chairs that froze him. 4 of them were neatly pushed in, but the 5th was pulled back, as if someone had just been sitting there. His parents had passed years ago. His younger brother, David, had disappeared when they were kids. There was no reason anyone should have been sitting there. Yet the dust on the seat had been disturbed, just enough to make his throat tighten. Michael laughed nervously, pushing the chair in, trying to shrug it off. But the air in the room was colder than he remembered, too cold for early October. That night, while unpacking in his old room, Michael heard it, a faint voice, a child's whisper, "Don't move my chair." He turned abruptly, heart pounding. The hallway was empty. The house creaked in all the usual places, but that voice, so soft, so close, it was unmistakable. He stood still, breathing shallowly. The kind of stillness your body enters when every primal instinct tells you you're not alone. He told himself it was just the wind, the house settling, maybe even his imagination. But as he shut the bedroom door and locked it, he couldn't help but glance once more at the hallway. And there, barely visible in the moonlight, were small, dusty footprints leading away from the dining room. Bare feet, child-sized. The next morning, Michael sat with a cup of coffee and pulled out one of the old photo albums his mother used to keep. Flipping through pages of birthdays, holidays, and messy kitchen memories, he stopped at a picture of his family sitting at the dining table. A Thanksgiving dinner from long ago. There were 5 people in the picture. Mum, Dad, him, David, and a boy he couldn't name. A boy who looked just like David, but paler, his face partially blurred. Michael stared at it, his hands trembling slightly. He didn't remember this child, but the chair he sat in, it was the 5th one. As Michael leaned closer to examine the photo, he felt the hairs on his neck rise. The blurred boy's eyes seemed to be looking at him now, directly at him. And just below the photo, in unfamiliar handwriting, was a note. "He belongs here. Don't forget again." Memories began to bleed into each other as Michael descended into the basement later that day. He wasn't sure why he went down there. Maybe to find more photos. Maybe just to escape the stillness of the upstairs. But halfway down, he remembered something strange. There used to be a locked door under the stairs, and there it was. He'd always assumed it led nowhere, just storage. But now, as he touched the doorknob, he noticed deep scratches around the wood, like someone or something had tried to claw their way out. Using an old rusted key from a kitchen drawer, he opened it. The room behind it was barely bigger than a closet. Inside, a child's mattress, torn stuffed animals, and faded crayon drawings covered the walls. One showed a family of 5. Mum, Dad, 2 brothers, and a 5th figure drawn with a red crayon. This one had no face. Michael backed away, stomach twisting. He had no memory of this room, and yet it felt familiar. That night he had the dream. He was young again, sitting at the dinner table, his mother placing mashed potatoes on his plate, his father carving a roast, David giggling across from him. But to Michael's right sat another boy. Same age, same smile. The family spoke to him, passed him the rolls. And when Michael turned to look, the boy turned too, his eyes pitch black. "You forgot me," the boy whispered. Michael jolted awake, drenched in sweat. The clock read 3:03 a.m. From downstairs came a soft scraping noise, like a chair being dragged. Determined to understand what was happening, Michael began searching through his father's old study. In one drawer, he found a series of handwritten notes. Some were letters, some journal entries. All mentioned the Whisper game, a game their mother had insisted they never play. Michael didn't remember it. One entry read, "David keeps playing it alone, says he hears the fifth voice. I told him to stop. I told him he's inviting something, but he just laughs." Another note, scrawled quickly and angrily. "If the fifth chair is pulled out again, we're leaving. I don't care what it wants. We are done." That night, Michael placed all 5 chairs around the dining table. He waited in silence. When the wind outside died and the house was still, a low whisper echoed through the room. "Let's play again." The lights flickered. Michael felt an invisible force push him into the chair at the head of the table. Across from him, the 4 other chairs slowly filled, shadows at first, then shapes. His mother, his father, a pale, silent version of David, and the 5th boy, now clear, now present. His lips moved though no words came out. The boy leaned forward. "You forgot the rules," he hissed. "You left me here." Michael's vision blurred, his breath hitched. "Who are you?" The boy's smile widened, too wide. "I'm your twin." Michael never left the house. Not really. His body was found weeks later, seated at the dining table. All 5 chairs were full, but only one person was alive. His eyes were open, his mouth frozen in mid-scream. And on the table, written in red crayon on the lace tablecloth, were 5 names. Michael, David, Mum, Dad, Eli. No one in the family had ever mentioned an Eli, but in the old records buried in the attic, police found something chilling. A birth certificate. Twins. Michael and Elijah. Eli had died at birth, or so they'd believed. But the 5th chair had always been waiting. They came for the body a week later. The new owners of the house, an older couple from Portland, had arrived early to inspect the property, unaware of what lay waiting inside. The stench hit them before they reached the dining room. The table was still set. 5 places, 5 old plates. Michael's face was contorted in a way the paramedics wouldn't describe in their report. But what disturbed them more was the underside of the table. Deep, frenzied scratch marks. Human fingernails. Torn, broken, embedded in the wood, as if someone had tried to pull themselves out from beneath. Down in the basement, the small room under the stairs was no longer empty. Crayons were scattered across the floor. Fresh drawings, childlike and chaotic, covered the walls. All showed the same scene from different angles. Michael at the table, surrounded by shadows, and a 5th figure smiling, always smiling. A single note lay in the center of the floor, written in shaky, childish handwriting. He said I could come back if we played again. The officers locked the door and labeled it unsafe. But that night, the 5th chair was pulled back once more. Now they say the house listens. Real estate agents won't step inside. The lights never stay on for long. People claim they hear soft scratching at night if they walk by the fence. A boy's giggle, sometimes a whispered question. "Wanna play?" One neighbour swore she saw a fifth figure through the dining room window during a storm, sitting completely still while the others blurred like smoke. But the worst story came from a local electrician who'd been hired to fix the breaker box in the basement. He ran out screaming 20 minutes later, pale and mumbling, unable to speak for hours. When he finally could, all he said was, "The walls. They were breathing. I heard them calling my name. They tried blessing the house, burning sage, hanging crosses. Nothing held. One pastor who dared to enter came back and clawed at his own ears until he bled. The whispers don't stop," he screamed. "He doesn't want silence. He wants family." Some believe the house is hungry now, that Eli, or whatever he's become, is looking for someone new to remember him. And if you sit too close to the fifth chair, even for a second, you might hear it too. A soft scrape, a quiet laugh, and the sound of your own name whispered from the walls. It was just after 11:30 p.m. when Andrew's phone rang. He was brushing his teeth, half listening to the late-night news humming in the bedroom. Seeing his older sister Karen's name on the screen, his stomach sank. She never called this late. Never. Not unless something was wrong. The last time had been their father's stroke. This time, it was worse. "Andrew, it's Mum," Karen said, her voice brittle. "She's gone." The toothbrush fell into the sink with a hollow clink. He stood still for a moment, water running. He didn't ask what she meant. Margaret Willis had been deteriorating for months in that creaking house on Hollow Ridge. Still, something in Karen's tone didn't sound like grief. It sounded like fear, tight, shaking fear. Andrew drove the 3-hour stretch to the family home in silence, the highway empty except for him and his own uneasy thoughts. That house had always been strange, full of sounds that had no source, lights that flickered for no reason, and rooms that seemed colder than others even in the summer. Margaret had refused to leave after their father died, saying the house needed someone. When Andrew arrived, Karen was curled up in the front room with a blanket, her eyes wide and unfocused. "She's in her bed," she said without looking up. "Still warm." Her voice had a flatness that didn't sit right. "But it's not her I'm worried about. It's the locked room." Andrew blinked. "The one upstairs?" She nodded. "Last night, I heard something from behind it. It sounded like Dad." The upstairs hallway was darker than he remembered, the wallpaper curling at the edges like burned paper. At the very end stood the locked door, unchanged in decades. Their parents had always kept it shut tight, padlocked with rusting metal. Andrew had always assumed it was storage, though no one had ever dared confirm it. But standing there again, he felt the unmistakable pull of something old and watching. Karen hesitated behind him. "I heard knocking from inside it," she said. 3 knocks, every night, then nothing. Andrew leaned in and listened. At first, silence. Then, right as he was about to step back, knock, knock, knock. Slow, deliberate. His spine froze. "Let's open it," he said. Karen's eyes widened. "You're insane." Andrew didn't answer. Some part of him already knew. Whatever was inside, it had waited long enough. They searched the house for hours. Drawers, old jars, under furniture. Nothing. It wasn't until Karen knocked over an old lamp in their father's study that they noticed the floor was uneven. Beneath a warped board, Andrew found it, an old brass key, cold as ice, engraved with faint, unreadable symbols along the side. They returned to the upstairs hallway. Andrew slid the key into the padlock. It opened with an eerie ease, like the lock had been waiting. The door creaked open, revealing nothing but pitch-black space beyond. He stepped in, phone light trembling in his hand. The air was wrong, dense, warm, and humid, like breath from a mouth too close. On the walls were dozens of framed family photographs, but the faces were off. Wrong angles, too many teeth, unnatural eyes. The room stretched inward far more than it should have. It bent space like a tunnel, deep and quiet and damp. In the far corner, an old rocking chair moved gently back and forth. At first, Andrew thought it was the breeze, until he realized there was no window and no breeze. A woman sat in the chair, hair hanging down, unmoving, her face hidden behind strands of grey. Karen whispered, "Mum?" But the body in the bed downstairs was proof otherwise. The woman looked up. Her face was Margaret's, kind of. Skin pulled tight over the skull, eyes too wide, smile too flat. "You came back," she said, "but this is not your home anymore." Her voice echoed with something inhuman beneath it, like two voices speaking in unison. Karen grabbed Andrew's arm. "We shouldn't have opened it." Karen stumbled backward into a full-length mirror that hadn't been there before. The glass rippled like water, distorting their reflections. Andrew saw something else in the glass. Another version of them. Older, hunched, screaming, reaching out. The woman in the chair stood up, and the mask of Margaret's face began to peel off, revealing only endless blackness underneath. The room shrank. The walls pulsed. The photographs began to change, one by one, their images melting into twisted silhouettes. "Close the door!" Karen cried. Andrew grabbed the handle and slammed it shut. But when he turned, the hallway outside had changed. The wallpaper was older. Mold crept across the ceiling. And somewhere in the dark, a child giggled softly. Panicked, Andrew dragged Karen down the stairs, every step groaning as if alive. The rooms had all shifted. Doors led to nowhere. Hallways bent in unnatural ways. The house didn't want them to leave. It was folding in on itself. Andrew grabbed the family photo album from a shelf. Inside, every page showed the same image. Them, in front of the locked door, over and over, through time. "I don't think we ever left this place," he whispered. "Not really." Karen stared at the pages, her face pale. "Maybe we never could." As they turned the corner to flee, the woman from the chair, now faceless, featureless, blocked the stairs. Her body twitched with something crawling under her skin. "You live here now," she said. "You always did." They broke into the basement, found the old oil lamps, and poured the contents along the walls and floor. The house creaked and shivered, its bones protesting. As Karen lit the match, the air screamed, low, guttural, like an animal dying. "No more," she whispered. "No more of this." The fire spread, but it didn't consume. Instead, the walls melted like flesh. Photographs screamed. The floor pulsed like a beating heart. Andrew fell through the floorboards and into darkness. He awoke later in his own apartment, alone, disoriented. No fire, no Karen, no house. But on his nightstand sat the brass key, cold, waiting. In the days that followed, Andrew barely moved. The key stayed beside his bed like an open eye. When he passed mirrors, they flickered. He began to hear voices in the walls, soft, wet breathing that grew louder at night. He swore he saw Karen walking past the apartment door, always out of reach, always silent. Then one evening, a knock came, not on the door, but inside the wall. He pressed his ear to the drywall. It was hollow, but breathing. He saw a slit begin to open, just enough for an eye to stare back. His reflection in the mirror behind him smiled and mouthed something. Then, slowly, its head turned, and kept turning, too far. On the 10th night, the building lost power. Total darkness. The street below vanished in shadow, every window black, except his. Slowly, one by one, windows began to glow orange with oil lamp light, just like Hollow Ridge, just like the room. The smell of rot returned, thick and sweet. He knew what it meant. He stepped into the hallway. Gone were the modern walls. In their place, green wallpaper, warped floors. The house had followed him. The Hollow Ridge house was no longer confined to Hollow Ridge. It was with him, inside him. From the end of the corridor, he heard the old creaking sound of that rocking chair again. "You left," said a voice behind him, "but we never did." It was a Thursday evening in early November when Julia's phone rang, an unassuming moment in the middle of folding laundry. But something about the name flashing on the screen made her breath catch. Aunt Marie. They hadn't spoken since the funeral 8 years ago. Her fingers hovered over the screen before she finally picked up. The voice on the other end was breathless and shaken, fragile in a way that chilled her to her core. "Julia," her aunt whispered, "you need to come back to the house, your father's house. Please, it's urgent." Julia sat down slowly, the mention of that house sinking her stomach like a stone. It had been empty for over a decade, ever since her father vanished without a trace. She had sworn never to return. The house in rural Maine wasn't just a house. It was the place where her childhood ended, where grief moved in like rot in the walls. But Aunt Marie wouldn't say more over the phone, just a repeated whisper. "You need to see it for yourself." Julia didn't sleep that night. The memories she had buried clawed at the edges of her mind. Her mother's screams, her younger brother's wet footsteps vanishing near the pond, the silence that followed. By morning, she had packed a bag. As she drove north along winding back roads, rain streaked the windshield, and a dread as thick as fog settled over her. She had no idea what she was walking back into. The house stood the way abandoned places do, like something left behind by time, sagging beneath the weight of years and secrets. The paint peeled like dead skin. The windows were smeared with time, and the porch steps groaned under her boots. Inside, the air was stale and cold, despite the season, smelling faintly of dust and damp wood. Aunt Marie waited in the hallway, thinner than Julia remembered, her hair wild, eyes darting to shadows as if they whispered to her. She didn't hug Julia. Instead, she looked past her toward the second floor. "It started 3 weeks ago," she muttered. "At first I thought it was just my mind, doors closing on their own, whispers at night. But then I found the room." Julia stared at her. "What room?" Her aunt's hands trembled as she pointed up the staircase. "The 5th bedroom. We only had 4, didn't we? Always 4. Julia nodded, confused. The layout hadn't changed since she was a child. 2 rooms on the left, 2 on the right. One belonged to her parents, the others to her and David. But Marie swore she opened a door last week at the top of the stairs, next to the attic, an entryway that had never existed before. And when I went inside, her voice cracked. I saw your mother and David, but it wasn't them. They looked like them, but wrong. Julia shivered. She'd spent years pushing those faces into the dark corners of her mind. She wasn't ready to bring them back. That night, unable to sleep, Julia found herself rummaging through the old file cabinet in the study, a place untouched by time. She unearthed a manila folder labelled Blueprints Original in her father's handwriting. The diagrams were clear: 4 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, an attic, and a crawl space. No sign of a 5th room. The wall beside the attic was solid, unmovable. Julia stared at it for a long time, her pulse rising with every minute. Aunt Marie joined her in silence, gripping a chipped teacup with white knuckles. I don't think it was ever built, she whispered. I think it just appeared, like the house remembered something we didn't. Later, as she walked the upstairs hallway, something shifted in the air. The passage near the attic now had a pale blue door, clean and freshly painted, impossibly out of place in the dusty, forgotten house. Julia reached for the knob, but Marie pulled her hand back. Not now, she said. Don't go in until you're ready. That night, Julia tossed and turned, haunted by dreams of her brother standing at the edge of the pond, reaching out. His mouth moved, but no sound came out. When she woke up, she realized the humming from her dream was real. A lullaby was playing faintly from behind the blue door. The next evening, unable to resist any longer, Julia returned to the blue door. Aunt Marie refused to go with her and warned her not to stay too long. Heart hammering, she turned the knob and stepped into the hallway beyond. It was far too long, longer than the house allowed, carpeted in red and lined with walls that pulsed slightly, like they were breathing. At the far end, a door stood ajar. As Julia approached, her childhood lullaby grew louder. Her legs trembled, but her hand reached forward as if pulled by something old and familiar. Inside was a bedroom frozen in time, her brother David's, exactly as it had been before he died. The rocket ship sheets, the nightlight shaped like a bear. Her mother sat on the edge of the bed, softly humming, stroking David's hair as he lay under the covers. Both turned to Julia and smiled. "Come to bed, sweetheart," her mother said gently. "We've been waiting for you." Julia's breath caught. Her knees weakened. This couldn't be real. Her mother had died of a stroke when Julia was 13. David drowned when he was 5. But their voices, they felt real, too real, and that's what terrified her most. She ran, stumbled out of the room, slammed the door behind her, and sprinted down the blood-red hallway, which now seemed longer, colder, and darker. The walls pulsed faster, and the humming followed her like a wind at her back. As she reached the hallway door, it slammed shut on its own, nearly catching her hand. She threw it open and collapsed against the wall. Aunt Marie stood at the top of the stairs, eyes glassy. "You saw them, didn't you?" she asked, already knowing the answer. Julia nodded, unable to speak. Her mouth was dry. Her hands shook uncontrollably. Marie sat beside her, wrapping her arms around her tightly. "The house. It's not haunted. It's remembering. Or maybe it's making you remember." Over the next day, things grew worse. Shadows moved across the walls when no one was near them. A low tapping echoed behind the mirrors. Julia began to dream vividly, images of events she didn't remember experiencing, like her mother whispering secrets into her ear at night, or David leading her through darkened hallways under the floorboards. The house didn't feel abandoned anymore. It felt full. Julia started to lose time. She'd find herself standing outside the fifth room without remembering how she got there. Sometimes the door would be open, sometimes it would be locked. The air around it grew heavier with each passing hour. She swore she heard her own voice coming from inside, laughing, crying, pleading. Marie begged her not to go back in. It's not your family anymore. It's not even memories. It's something wearing their faces. But Julia couldn't stay away. Something deep inside her needed to see them again, to make sense of what had happened, to bring back what had been stolen from her. The next time she opened the door, the room had changed. It was the kitchen now, her childhood kitchen, warm with morning light that didn't match the weather outside. Her father sat at the table, alive, sipping coffee like it was just another day. "There's my girl," he said with a grin. David giggled beside him. Julia nearly collapsed. How are you here?" she whispered. Her father smiled. "You never left us. You just forgot." A part of her wanted to stay, badly, but her hand brushed the coffee mug and recoiled. It was ice cold. The warmth was an illusion. Julia backed away from the kitchen table. Her father's grin still plastered in place like a mask too tight for his face. The sunlight streaming in began to flicker, as though coming from a faulty bulb. When she looked again, the scene had shifted slightly. David's eyes were glassy now, unmoving, yet he still smiled. Her mother appeared behind her, hand on her shoulder, cold as stone. "You're tired, sweetheart," she cooed. "Come lie down. Just for a little while." Julia's legs weakened under the weight of confusion and grief. Every instinct screamed that something was wrong, yet the warmth of family tugged at her like a chain. She moved toward the hallway, shaking, but the doorway seemed farther away now. Her father stood suddenly, knocking his chair back with a clatter, and said in a voice too flat to be real, "Why are you leaving? You belong here." David crawled from his chair and latched onto her ankle, giggling as he dragged her toward the hallway's center. "We missed you, Jules." Panic exploded inside her as she kicked free and bolted. The hallway twisted beneath her feet. Her family's laughter turned to shrieks, ragged and echoing with something old and monstrous behind them. As she reached the exit door, she slammed it shut, holding it with her full weight as the doorknob turned slowly on the other side. For the next day and night, Julia refused to go upstairs. She stayed downstairs with all the lights on, gripping a fire poker in her lap. Marie wouldn't come out of her room. Julia considered leaving, but the storm outside had worsened, trapping her. When she finally mustered the courage to return to the hallway, her breath caught. The blue door was gone. Not closed, not hidden, gone. In its place, just an old, yellowed wall. She knocked on it, pressed her palm against it, even scratched the paint away in disbelief. But there was nothing there. No sound, no cold air, no red carpet, just silence. That night, Marie sat across from her, staring blankly at the wall. "It's not done with you," she said quietly. "It let me out once, but only after I brought someone in." Julia's blood ran cold. "What do you mean?" Marie didn't blink. "I couldn't bear it anymore. It wanted someone else. I gave it you." Julia stood slowly, realization creeping over her like frost. Marie's face was pale but calm, accepting. "Now it has what it needs," she added, her voice barely audible. "It can build the sixth room." Julia opened her mouth to scream, but she already knew. The house didn't need permission anymore. A week later, a hiker found Julia's car off a dirt road 20 miles from the town. The keys were still in the ignition, the trunk packed with clothes, and the passenger seat held a dusty, crumpled photograph. One no one remembered being taken. In the image stood Julia with her parents and brother, all smiling in front of the old house. The problem was, Julia never looked like that at the age David was alive. And worse, she wasn't in the original copy of that photo. The picture had changed, as if the house had written her into it, or swallowed her into its memory. Back inside the old house, long since forgotten, another door had appeared. This one black, with no handle, no frame. Just a smooth, pulsing shape in the hallway near the attic. From behind it came a low hum, like a lullaby slowed down and played backward. Inside that door, a new room waited, the 6th room. Inside it sat Julia, her face turned toward the door, her eyes blank and endless. She rocked slowly in an old chair, holding a photograph to her chest, and behind her, the walls breathed. The house was full again.